Out to deck. How you doing, guys?
Thank you.
It's like watching a film, but then all of a sudden we're in a film.
Roughly 5,000 metres above sea level. To give you an idea, that's about 700 metres on top of Kilimanjaro.
Greaser cycle still going.
I mean, it's just such a good film. And so we're obviously going to have James come on and see us shortly too, from his boat, wherever that is in the world. And then we're going to have a little bit of a Q&A. But Ben, you're the filmmaker of the two of you, I believe, right? So you actually put that film together.
Yeah, that's right. So we all shot it all ourselves, and then I edited it back here. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. So is that your background personally then? So is that your job, like you're a filmmaker?
Yeah, so I'm a full-time camera operator. I used to do more filmmaking. Now it's sort of more just pointing the camera and then sort of handing it off for someone else to edit it.
Cool.
But yeah.
Very cool, mate. You can tell. Because it's really well shot. Yeah.
Where did the idea come from then, in terms of going to the Amazon? You've gone from, I guess, a sofa across the UK to a canoe across the Amazon. It's quite both equally as impressive in our book, but obviously the Amazon's pretty awesome. What made you guys think of that?
I'm not sure. So we've done a few things. So we did the sofa thing that you mentioned, and then we went to the Knoydart Peninsula in Scotland as well, and just took a jacket that turned out it wasn't waterproof, and then we had a specialist item each, and then a bag of oats and a blanket, and that was all we were allowed to survive on for a week, and even that was pretty tough. And then we got into the Adventure Travel Film Festival. And then we started watching other films and stuff and being like, yeah, we want to do something bigger and better. And then we were just like, well, what can we make? Like, what's our sort of skill set? And we realized that making is probably where we're different from other adventurers, maybe. So we're like, oh, let's build something. And then the sort of obvious idea was to build a dugout canoe, just because it's such a simple way to get around.
Yeah. Really cool, really cool. I think James is just turning up now. James, we can.
Sorry, am I late? That's really awkward.
Not at all. It's all, the timing's been thrown like downstream, if you like. It's all gone out of the window. So yeah, thanks for coming, man. Thanks for joining us from your boat. And yeah, thanks for coming on. Ben was just telling us about the idea behind the project, and that you guys have done a few things before. You've taken a sofa across southern England. We showed that film earlier today, and then your survival sort of week on a Scottish island. I've watched that one too. It's really cool stuff. So you guys have always just been into doing adventurous things together. Are you old school friends, or what's the crack?
We met at Durham University, so actually it all started when we were climbing. So we used to do a lot of climbing together, but neither of us were actually that good at climbing, so we could never make a film about it. But I suppose that's where we sort of like bonded over our love of like adventure and being in the outdoors. Oh,
cool. And then it eventually took you, obviously, to the Amazon, to that film, and people are still joining us now because the way we've had to do it, but everyone's slowly getting here. We've got 50 people here now, so that's good. We've got loads of questions coming in. We're going to quiz you a bit about your Amazon adventure. It's a pretty mad thing to dream up, lads, just to go out there and get a canoe out of a tree like that. What was the harder bit, digging out the canoe or taking it on the journey after? Like, what was the tougher part of the adventure?
James?
I don't know, like, it's funny because the canoeing wasn't difficult, except for maybe the tedium. Like, we both suffered a little bit, just like, your bum just gets so bruised. I think the bum just gets bored of sitting down for as long as it is. So you sort of spend 9 hours in what is an ergonomically awful vehicle. And then it's only at the end of the day that you actually have to do anything that's difficult. So setting up camp's the only real hard part. But I suppose, so physically, building the canoe was much more demanding, but it was almost more stimulating. So you're sort of distracted from the discomfort because, the experience is so rich, the culture is amazing. So every day you're suffering a little bit, but you're experiencing so much that actually you're sort of energized by that. And a lot of the time, that I suppose it never really felt as difficult as it should have been, because we were just enjoying ourselves too much. So obviously we got the shits a lot. That was probably the most difficult thing, is that. But other than that, we were pretty perky.
Yeah, leaving the place we were living with Bai in Napaika, that was probably one of the most difficult things. That took about 2 weeks, because every time we were about to leave, they were like, "Oh, why don't you come and do this with us? Like, we're going fishing with this poisonous vine that we've harvested. So you want to come?" And we're like, "Yeah, sure, we'll do that." And then, but we were going to leave, and then there was this huge storm, and the river flooded, so we couldn't leave because of that. And then they were like, "Oh, there's a big party. It's like Mother's Day. Come to this party." So we went to this party, and then we're like, the next day. And then, this flood. Bai was like, "If you leave today, you'll die." So we were like, "Okay, we won't leave today." And then we left the next day, and then James did nearly die. So
fell off the back of the canoe when you got hit by that branch. You mean that bit?
Yeah. It was pretty bad, actually.
Yeah, I thought that sounded pretty dangerous. Actually, it kind of played down a little bit in the film, but I guess you're on your own out there, right? There's no one around can't ring the R in a lie.
Yeah, and because the river flow is so strong, like the canoe's 8 meters long and it weighs like half a ton, and it was getting like just trapped up against these branches across the river. So when James was in the water, if he'd just been pushed under a branch, he would have just been held under, and that would be that.
Jeez.
So how long were you guys out there for in general then? Were you out there for, you sort of mentioned you could get put off and that sort of thing, how, like actually in Ecuador and that sort of stuff for you guys?
So the whole trip was 2 months.
Okay.
Um,
And in terms of, I suppose, you sort of touched on the different sort of challenges and that sort of stuff. One thing that people kept putting on this feed was how impressive the cinematography is with this film. But how challenging or difficult is it to continue filming when there's all these external elements and sort of challenges you're facing at the same time? I guess mentally, physically, in terms of finding the motivation to continue shooting it, that must be like so hard.
Yeah, it was. But then a lot of it, the reason for doing the trip for me was in part to make a film, and like that's what I enjoy. So like all the sort of macro stuff of animals, that's kind of like an escape from where you are as well, and it's something to do. It's like an activity that you really enjoy, and like an amazing place where there's loads of stuff. So it's kind of like a relief from like the everyday life of being there, and so it's doing another hobby.
But also, the more difficult things, the things that are different, like that make you more uncomfortable, are going to be the most interesting things in the film. So you're compelled to capture them because we wanted to make the best film that we could. We invested a lot of ourselves and a lot of our energy and a lot of our money in this film project. So if something bad happened, we were gutted if we didn't capture it on film. Like there's lots of things that we didn't because we didn't have the energy to film it. But luckily enough was there that we were able to pick up the cameras at the right time. I think that actually making a film about something like that actually compels you to push yourself more because you are putting yourself out there with the end of a product. I think so as a result, we got a richer experience because we prioritized the film.
Yeah, you can tell that you did prioritize the film because it's done so well. One thing for me, lads, I really want to know is, have you had any contact with the canoe? Do you know who's got the canoe these days? Is it well? Or is that it? You sold it because it's quite abrupt when you sell it in the film.
Yeah, no, that's literally it. That was how it happened. It was like, we're going to go to this village and we're going to sell it. And then we met those army guys on the way down to Rocafuerte. So he was just like, came steaming up to us a few hours later and was like, "I want to buy the canoe, go down to this village, you'll meet my friend, he's got your money, leave the canoe with him." And then as that sort of transaction was happening, they were like, "Right, you've got to go here now to go to the border office and get your passport stamped. And there's a boat leaving in like 5 minutes. You have to be on that one. Otherwise you'll miss the next boat, which gets you to the town where you get the next boat to get the next boat to get out of here." It was all like really rushed, and then it was just this like hectic journey.
Wow.
I doubt the boat exists anymore because the reason that big tree was there is because Bai would never normally use that timber to make a canoe from because it was much softer than the timber that he would normally use. So it doesn't have the longevity. So let's say a really good old-fashioned hardwood would last 5 years. He said that canoe would probably last less than a year.
Right.
And that's the only reason he let us use that timber, because it didn't really have any value to him.
Right.
That's why we were able to make the canoe quite quickly, because it was just so easy to work with, because it was very soft.
Right.
Actually, Ben brought a piece back, and it was like balsa wood once it dried out, so lightweight.
Really?
So it probably just turned into firewood, which is a bit sad.
It probably rotted away into the bottom of a river.
I mean, like, you guys stayed with that family for obviously quite a while. They sort of built this, how we built this canoe. How did you even like meet them in the first place? I'm assuming you didn't just hop on the plane and just try your luck with an indigenous family. There was some sort of setup beforehand.
Yeah, so I used to do some filming for a travel research company called Operation Wallacea, and they run like school and university research trips. And one of the countries, they do it to like, I think 12, 13 countries around the world. And I've been making films for them, and I made contact with their local project partners that run their Ecuador project, and then told them about the idea of making a canoe, and they were like, yeah, that sounds like an amazing idea. Go to this village called the Pica. You'll meet a guy called Bai. He's really friendly. He'll help. We'll let him know that you might come. And then we basically showed up like 6 months later, and Bai was like, "Oh, here. Oh, I've been expecting you." That's great.
That's so good. It was that's brilliant. It must have been so like random for you guys to finally arrive. So, what was it like living with him for a month? Then talk to us a little bit about Bai and the family and what that was like.
Well, actually, the whole experience like evolved quite a lot from the moment that when we first arrived compared to the moment that we left. Like when we first arrived, they very much treated us like a normal tourist. So it felt very performative, the way that they acted and they dressed, and then they would prepare individual meals for us. So we felt like we were very much outsiders looking in. But after about a few days, maybe a week, our novelty wore off, and then we just started to be treated like them. So we ate the same meals as them. They just acted in the normal way, which was actually much more engaging for us because it felt so much more authentic. And their lives are so interesting without having to sort of perform, that we just got this like what felt like a really sort of honest portrayal of their lives. And then the more we were there, the more we were open to their world, and they invited us on all of their excursions. So we were just fortunate that we had the time that we could be there for 5 weeks and experience so much, because their culture is really rich and their every day is very varied. So you can't really see it in the snapshot that so many people get when they just visit for a day or two. So it felt like a real privilege.
And it was also like, once we'd been there for a while, we would like help with the cooking and sort of the daily life. And then we'd cook things for them. So we'd brought some food with us. So we'd given this huge bag of rice as a gift, which was a recommended thing to do. And then we'd bought like other stuff that we thought would be interesting. So we had like beans and things. So we made things like bean burgers, and then we like shared them with them, and they were like, "Oh, what is this? This is like weird food." And obviously the bread that's in the film, like, all sorts of stuff. And they're just like, "What? Who are these guys that are like here, like squatting down around the fire with us? Normally the tourists are sort of over there."
What was the communication like, guys? Obviously, you seem like you built a good relationship with them, but I'm assuming that you don't necessarily.
You guys could speak Spanish, or is that what it was? You were just speaking fluent Spanish to each other, or what's the crack?
Yeah, so I speak Spanish, sort of, and then Bai, it's his second language, but his wife didn't really speak any Spanish, which is why she's not in the film that much, because she would speak for like ages, and then Bai would just be like, "Yeah, she likes it," and be like, "She must have said more than that. These are pretty good bean burgers we've just made her."
What was your last contact with them? Obviously, not there anymore, are they? So yeah, what's the last bit of news?
Yeah, what's the crap with that, fellas? That was a pretty sad ending to the film, really.
Yeah, pretty brutal. So that was news that came through the project partners that helped us arrange that initial contact, and they ran an eco lodge which employed the Warani, was certain Warani members, community members, as tour guides and cooks and stuff in an eco lodge. So it's like a sustainable way for them to live their lifestyles through tourism, to have an income. And they've had to shut down that lodge since the oil workers moved in, because that's not what tourists want to see when they visit the area.
Yeah.
So that's sort of when our contact really ended, because there's no way of getting in touch anymore.
So do you think that family, though, and by are still living in a traditional way? Is that what the idea, or do you think that was them sort of thrust out into the modern world from?
No, so they, as far as we know, they're living a very similar lifestyle, but on the other side of the river.
Right.
So actually, on one of our last days there, we'd been for this really long walk with Bai, and we suddenly like burst out into this big clearing. He was like, "Yeah, this is what we've been working on. We've been clearing this area to move to." And they told us when we were there that it was because they wanted to be on top of a hill, have a better view, and they'd been down by the river for too long and it was too busy.
Right.
And then maybe that they'd already had, they'd already heard rumours that this deal might happen, and they were going to have to move anyway.
Right, makes sense. Well, that's good. They can still kind of live a traditional life a bit. So, as you talked about you cooking meals for them, but obviously in the film there we see some pretty different kinds of foods you're getting into. The monkey thing is quite a striking bit of film. What was that like? Guess James, most interesting, because I mean, it is the line of the film. I think probably there's a few good one-liners from you, but the anus stuff is pretty good. So, what was it like eating monkey anus?
Well, it just tasted like a bit like a combination between offal and like semi-digested leaves. Like you definitely knew that you were eating an intestine, maybe not an anus. But they found it very funny. But unfortunately, they sort of catch all this amazing like jungle meat, and then they just boil everything. So no matter how delicious it potentially could be, it just tastes like boiled meat. So it's like very chewy, still very hairy, because they don't skin anything. They just burn the hair off on the fire. So that's why you see the picture of the monkey on the fire, because they're literally just burning the hair off. So you've got a semi-hairless bit of meat. So it sort of spoils it. So I'd much rather have a banana. But the novelty is like, I suppose you get caught in the moment and you're like, yeah, great. It's just something, it's nice to have something different. So yeah, it's pretty good. But I wouldn't order in a restaurant.
It sounds like you wouldn't necessarily recommend it, mate, to be fair. I mean, if I ever find myself in that sort of scenario, maybe I'll give it a go as well. But I'll tell you what, guys, we don't want to keep for too long because we do appreciate it's already gone past 9. But there are a couple of questions from people in general. There's a guy, Murray. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your surname here, Murray Degrees, I think. And he's asking about obviously paddling down the Amazon. Is there not moments where you just sort of realise, you're well aware that animals are around you, probably got all sorts in the water. Is it not like how sort of scary is it? And when you're sort of going down somewhere like that and being completely in the wild sort of thing?
It's tricky. You sort of just get used to it. It just becomes like your daily life. Like it wasn't like, oh my God, you're like on edge every day. Like imagine there's like a jaguar or an anaconda or something. Right. It just sort of becomes part of your life. You're just going through this jungle. But then, it's times when you like go for a wee in the night or something, and you're just a bit like, oh, this is a bit scary. And there was one time where I actually did go for a wee in the night and weed on a 6-foot fer de lance, which is like one of the most venomous snakes in the world.
And you weed on it?
Yeah, it slithered off pretty quickly.
Yeah, that's that's taking the piss, I guess, really, mate, to go there and just weed straight on it. Yeah,
but I didn't do it on purpose. Just clear. That was an accident. It was dark.
Maybe you gave you the benefit of the doubt, and that's why slithered off. Who knows? But yeah, I can't imagine that. Well, I suppose I imagine like being in that scenario. I suppose living with being with a family for a bit first kind of helps ease into it a little bit. Doesn't it?
Yeah, especially if they've got so many kids that they'll just be like running around like wielding machetes, and like they had again the same type of snake came into the village or the settlement where we were there, and they just like basically just chopped it to pieces with a machete, and they're like 5-year-old kids, and they're just running around with no shoes on and stuff. So it does make you feel a lot more comfortable when you see that level of comfort in a jungle.
Yeah, because I guess you guys have got a bit of background though. So one of the questions just come in there. So what did you do to prepare for the trip? But I guess you're kind of quite outdoorsy already, I guess, with the previous stuff. So you're quite comfortable with just going into the forest, clearing an area, making a camp. Because to me, that sounds pretty serious straight away, to be honest. Is that just second nature to you guys?
Yeah, so I've done a bit actually. When I was like 18, I did like your sort of classic gap year project where we lived in a jungle in Belize for a couple of months, and then you do like a week jungle training before you go.
All
So
right.
sort of delving into the depths of my memory for that.
But I think
Cool.
part of the way we approached it was to be deliberately underprepared. Like you can spend so long thinking about a project and preparing and training that you end up like almost tainting it by overthinking it. And so much of what we experienced was like more enjoyable because the risk was still there and you learn. And no matter how effectively you train or think about it when you're in the UK, like living with a community that it's there every day is so much more like informative and engaging. So I think if we'd done it in a different order, it would have been different. But they are so relaxed in that environment that you sort of adopt that mentality. So I think if we were just paddling down the Amazon without that encounter, it would have been very much more daunting than it was.
Yeah. And
We spent a lot more time sort of planning like what cameras and stuff and how we're going to charge it and that sort of thing than we did like the actual like, oh, we're going to be like scared.
Yes. How does that work then? Like in terms of charging and stuff like that? 'Cause a few people ask that as well. Like you're just going on the Amazon trying to, or even just where you are, trying to charge cameras and that sort of stuff. What is, I guess, recommended if you ever find yourself in a similar scenario to that?
So we had two folding 22-watt solar panels, and then they charge up little batteries, and then from that you charge your camera batteries, laptop, and a drone. So yeah,
Cool.
and then there's some of the worst bits in the trip actually, like the most difficult bits where you're like, oh shit, it's like one was when we broke one of the solar panels, like one of the connectors just snapped, so we were like busy like trying to tie it together with a bit of thread. Obviously we didn't take anything to solder it with or anything.
Yeah.
And then the other one's when when I dropped a camera in the river, which, yeah,
Not a good idea.
yeah, it's not great. It didn't come out well from that.
Funny. So lads, if you were to come across two guys now who said they want to go to the Amazon, dig out a canoe and take it on a journey down the river, would you say yes, go for it? And if you would, what bit of advice would you give to them? Want to go first, James?
I think the most important bit of advice is to make sure you do it in a responsible way. Like we were hyper aware that we are two white guys going to an indigenous community and chopping down something that's very precious. So we were quite sensitive and very worried about that. So I wouldn't suggest that everyone should just go and do that. But you know, there is ways of going about it to make sure that if you are going to chop down a tree, you do it in a way that the community that you're working with benefits. And then in that case, I just think don't worry too much about anything else. Like make sure you do it in an exciting way, but don't like spoil it by thinking too much. And just like make sure it's fun. Like I suppose that's the most important thing, isn't it? Maybe a bit safe, but not too safe.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. Just make sure if you want to do it, just enjoy it. That's the reason for doing it. Like all adventures, pretty selfish. So make sure you get the most out of it.
Yeah, for sure. And what about you guys for the future? Have you got any more grand plans to go on adventures together or anything? Or
well, we were meant to be going to Mongolia this year, but obviously that hasn't quite happened.
Yeah.
Sitting around at home instead.
Yeah, we were very close actually. We've been thinking about it for like 6 years, and we were like poised to buy the flights, and then shit started to get real, and then we didn't. So we could have been trapped in Mongolia for a long time.
And what's the plan, lads? Is it to go and build a yurt or something, or just go and enjoy Mongolia? Or
we
do you
were
want
gonna
to learn how to film next festival?
Be like animal herders and like learn how to look after animals and become sort of sufficient off that way of life.
Oh, cool.
So we were going to buy ourselves a collection of animals and then migrate across the landscape. Neither of us can ride horses, so we were going to learn to ride horses and maybe. So that was the approximate
You've got
plan.
to do that.
Yeah, lots of stuff go wrong.
Oh, definitely. I can't wait to watch that film. I'm sure that'll happen one day. That sounds hilarious. And yeah, quite a challenge. All right, lads. Well, Reese, any pressing questions from you, or should we let these guys get to bed because you're an hour late?
Yeah, no, I think that's good, guys. Thank you so much for coming on an hour later than anticipated. Sincerest apologies about the technical issues we had. But as I said, people from what I can see really enjoyed it, and a few people went onto the channel. It's obviously available on Amazon Prime for anyone who doesn't want to watch it, so they can go over there. It's well worth it. So, yeah, guys, thanks so much.
I actually, Reese, I just sent you an email with like a link so people can watch it for free if they don't have Amazon Prime.
Oh, cool.
With the Armchair Adventure Festival as a free code.
Oh,
Awesome.
cool.
So if people
Thank
want
you
to
so much, mate.
watch it again, maybe, or share it, then you're welcome to do that.
Yeah, we'll do. And guys, go onto the lads' Vimeo channel and drop them a subscribe or whatever it is, a like and a comment and stuff, because I know it's important to get it out there that way. And thanks so much, fellas, for coming on. Hopefully, we'll have you back in the future with some herding stuff across Mongolia. I'd love to see that. So, yeah, until then, yeah, thanks for coming on. And yeah, cheers. Wow, that was a nice little bonus, wasn't it, mate? Extra Q&A session this week from the guys from DugOut, Ben and James. I enjoyed it. The lads were very kindly stuck around for us after a couple of technical difficulties. So pleased they hung on for that. Did you enjoy the film, mate, and the Q&A despite all the
Yeah, I love the film, mate. Yeah, I love the film. I was a huge fan when I watched it last year. I was a huge fan when I watched it again. So yeah, really good work with the guys. And yeah, like you said, really pleasant, friendly. Didn't have to wait around for the Q&A. That happened an hour later than anticipated, but they did. So even if you didn't see it and you're now watching the Q&A, very similar to Ollie Hunter Smart suggestion, we recommend going and watch it now because it is fantastic.
Oh, and if it's still available, then you can go to the Armchair Adventure Festival group, click on the link and watch it for free. Depends if you're still watching when you're watching this, when it is. If it's 2040, maybe watch something a bit more relevant, because this is old, man.
But if it is about now.
If it's about now, yeah, then www.facebook.com and then the Armchair Adventure Festival group, click watch for free. So that's it, mate. That's DugOut. You got anything you can tell us about the next film now? Or are you keeping that firmly up your sleeve?
I'm a slave.
Okay. Right. Okay. So that means there's no news from us here. But if you do want to be the first to find out about it, then just get over to the Patreon page. We'll maybe take a peek at Reese's sleeve. It's $1 a month.